Static Shock is what Spider-Man was too scared to become. Let's see what's going on with this though. Hold on. What you mean Static Shock was Spider-Man was too scared to become? Static Shock was a good show. Growing up, watching and learning. Yeah.
He's just a Spider-Man knockoff with an electric gimmick. The jokes are stale. They're the same one-liners Spidey's been doing for decades. Milestone made a hero, WB just repainted him. He's a wisecracking teenager, nerdy, bullied, bitten, well, gassed, by an accident that wasn't supposed to happen to him. Fights crime after school, still has to make it home for dinner. For 20 years, that's the only way people knew how to talk about Static, as a copy, a knockoff, the Black Spider-Man. Never the original. Never the standard, just the understudy nobody asked for. Here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Static Shock did the version of this story, Spider-Man.
Man, I'm still mad that what's it called? Static Shock don't got a movie. Why he doesn't got no movie? Why ain't nobody really played this man as a movie yet? Same as Blade. Blade should have been had a movie.
Was never allowed to do. Same setup, same DNA, completely different stakes. Let that sink in. Static Shock isn't a knockoff of Spider-Man. Static Shock is exactly what Spider-Man was too comfortable, too protected, and too safe to ever become. To understand why that comparison even exists, you have to go back to 1993 and a comic industry that had a representation problem nobody in charge wanted to admit it out loud. Milestone Comics was founded by Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, and Derek T. Dingle, 4 black creators who looked at the entire superhero landscape and saw the same thing. Heroes who were either white by default or written by people who had never lived a day as anything else. Static was one of Milestone's launch characters, Virgil Hawkins, a science nerd from Dakota City who gets caught in the crossfire of a gang conflict, gassed by an experimental chemical during a police raid gone wrong, and comes out the other side with electromagnetic powers he has to learn to control with basically no instruction manual. And immediately, before the character even had a chance to prove himself, the comparison showed up. Nerdy teenager, secret identity, wisecracks mid-fight. People looked at Virgil and reflexively said, oh, it's their Spider-Man. Not a new hero. Not an original take on the teenage hero formula. Their Spider-Man. As if a black kid with powers could only ever be understood.
Wait, what came out first? Spider-Man or Static Shock? Ain't Static Shock came out first? No, I swear I thought did Static Shock came out first or Spider-Man? Hold on. I'm gonna look this up real quick. That's a research right there. It's finest. Hold on. Spider-Man came out. Hey, man, I thought Static Shock came out first. I ain't lying to you.
To a white one first. That framing followed Static everywhere, and it followed the show even harder when it premiered in the year 2000. Static Shock had real pedigree behind it. The same production circle that built Batman the Animated Series and the Animated Series, with McDuffie himself as Cowan directing. It was the first superhero show built around an African-American lead, and even with that history-making premise, critics still couldn't resist the lazy shorthand, some outlets dinging the show's humor as stale and too similar to Spider-Man style. Like the jokes were the problem, instead of the fact nobody wanted to sit with what made this specific kid's story different in the first place. Think about how backwards that is for a second. A brand new production, built by the actual creators of the character, telling an original story city built from scratch, gets compared to a decades-old white character before anyone even bothers to ask what the show is trying to say. It's not that people watched Static Shock and concluded it was derivative. It's that a lot of people decided it was derivative before they watched a single frame, because nerdy teenager gets powers only had one reference point allowed in their heads. That's not criticism. That's a lack of imagination being dressed up as one. So Static Shock had to spend its entire run proving the comparison backwards. Not how is this like Spider-Man, but watch what this show does that Spider-Man never had to. Season 1 drops Virgil into Dakota City with a target already on his back, and not from a supervillain, from his own neighborhood. The gang war that gave him his powers wasn't a freak lab accident in a sealed building. It was a street-level riot the cops escalated with an explosive round. That's the origin. Not a radioactive spider in a science exhibit. A chemical weapon deployed on kids during a gang conflict. Virgil doesn't get his powers because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time in some sanitized science fair sense. He gets them because his city was already a battlefield before he ever put on a costume. From there, the show kept walking into rooms other superhero cartoons of the era wouldn't even open the door to. Sons of the Fathers put racism directly in front of the camera. No metaphor, no mutant stand-in. Virgil's best friend Richie takes him home for dinner, and Virgil sits across from Richie's father, hearing him talk about those people in his own house.
Yeah, son. That episode right there, that made me want to talk to dude no more. Because your family is that, bro. I don't want to hang with you, bro. You're not my guy. You're not my dog no more, man. You ain't stand up and say that and talk about dad chilling, man. Like, that's weird. Like, they still people at the end of the day, too. Then I'm like, man, you not my dog. Like, ain't no way.
And the show doesn't soften it into an after-school special lecture, it just lets Virgil's hurt and Richie's anger at his own father sit there, uncomfortable and real. Frozen Out tackled homelessness, following a kid Virgil's own age who's living on the street with nowhere else to go, in a genre that mostly treats poverty as scenery instead of a plot. And then there's Jimmy, the episode that more than any—
Oh, yeah, bro. I remember this episode, too. The bully kept bullying him and he brought a gun to school. This episode taught me that you need to stop the bully before it start bullying other people kids. Why I say that? Because kids were really they got kids really don't know how to fight, and then they really go get their parents' weapon and go shoot a kid, and they don't because they don't know better because they got bullied, and now they end up in jail because they getting bullied the whole entire time. It's a sad world we living in.
Any other explains why this comparison to Spider-Man was always too small for what the show was doing. No supervillain, no clean resolution. A bullied kid named Jimmy Osgood brings his father's gun to school, and in the chaos, Static's best friend Richie gets shot. There's no costume fight to solve it, no last-second save that fixes everything. Static is left dealing with guilt over a tragedy his powers were completely useless against. The show's own director has drawn a direct line between that episode and the real-world tragedy at Columbine, and it aired in a landscape where networks were actively nervous about how violence appeared in kids' programming in the wake of it. McDuffie and co-writer Alan Burnett won the 2003 Humanitas Prize for it. A children's superhero cartoon won a prize usually reserved for scripts that treat their audience like adults, because that's exactly what Jimmy did. Even the show's quieter choices carry weight nobody expected from a kid's WB block. Compare that to what Spider-Man's mainstream adaptations were doing in the same stretch of years. Peter Parker's story is a genuinely great one. Guilt, responsibility, the weight of with great power, nobody's arguing that. But it's also structurally the safest possible version of a teenager with powers. Middle class, white, a story where the villain of the week is a scientist gone wrong or a mobster in a mask, and the neighborhood itself is never the threat. One book reviewer put it about as—
I ain't gonna hold you. With Spider-Man, it was that episode when dude had turned to a rhino and he was getting bullied and stuff like that. And he went to school and trying to find a bully and all that other stuff. Like, that was an episode. So I ain't gonna lie to you. That was an episode to talk about.
Bluntly as it's ever been put. Peter Parker is white, privileged, and safe from the gun crime and turf wars that show up on Virgil Hawkins' actual school grounds. Gun crime and turf wars.
I see you. And then she got the pressure bill already. Hold on. Is she struggling? Dang, how her leg like that though? Golly.
that show up on Virgil Hawkins' actual school grounds. Same basic shape of hero, wildly different amount of real world the story is willing to let in. And that's the thing that finally forced people to stop treating Static as the knockoff and start treating him as a peer, when the show put him directly next to the DC Pantheon and he didn't shrink. Static and Gear get called up to the Watchtower in a league of their own, standing in as human batteries in a full-blown fight against Brainiac, one of the most dangerous minds in the entire DC universe. Not a cameo, not a nod, a real seat at the table with the Justice League, earned mid-series on a show that was still finding time to do after-school special caliber episodes about racism and gun violence in between crossovers with Batman. That's the moment the he's just their Spider-Man argument stops holding up. Because Spider-Man, for all his greatness, exists in a Marvel New York where his personal traumas rarely intersect with the actual social fabric of the city around him. Static exists in a Dakota where the powers, the villains, and the community harm are all coming from the same broken system. He's not fighting evil that shows up from outer space and leaves. He's fighting the fallout of the exact riot that created him. In the same neighborhood, he still has to go to school in the morning. Let's stack it up, because once you actually line these up side by side, the knockoff label falls apart fast. First superhero cartoon built around a black lead, that's Static Shock, full stop. Not a footnote, the actual first. A 2002 Annie Award for Outstanding Achievement, plus multiple Daytime Emmy nominations for a show that was simultaneously writing episodes about homelessness, dyslexia, and gun violence between metahuman battles. A Humanitas Prize, an award built to recognize scripts that communicate meaningfully about the human condition for a Saturday morning superhero cartoon. Spider-Man adaptations of the same era, as beloved as they are, were not winning humanitarian storytelling prizes for their villain of the week structure. 52 episodes across 4 seasons, and by seasons 3 and 4, Static isn't guest starring in someone else's universe. He's crossing over directly with Batman and the Justice League as an equal, not a sidekick borrowing the spotlight. Multiple award nominations across 4 straight years of production, from a show most networks in that era would have treated as disposable Saturday morning filler. And it happened.
Well, I go Harley fine. I know that Harley Quinn fine, so I know that's Harley Quinn. That's my baby.
Most networks in that era would have treated as disposable Saturday morning filler. And it happened while the show's writer's room included the actual co-creators of the character, meaning none of this substance was accidental. It was the point from the very beginning, not something a later adaptation stumbled into. And the character design itself does something Spider-Man's mythology structurally can't. It ties the hero's powers directly to a specific, real, community-level harm, a chemical weapon used on a crowd of teenagers, instead of an isolated, victimless lab accident. Every time Static uses his powers, the show is quietly reminding you where they came from and who put them there. Stack the subject matter next to each other, and it gets even more where they came from and who put them there. Lab accident. Every time Static uses his powers, the show is quietly reminding you where they...
She's a bird? She got the trashiest power. Okay.
Lab accident. Every time Static uses his powers, the show is quietly reminding...
Oh, it's clean. He must have got stretchy powers. She got a bird power? She got the trashiest power. What his power is?
You where they came from and who put them there. Stack the subject matter next to each other and it gets even more lopsided. In roughly the same stretch of years, mainstream Spider-Man storytelling on screen was largely built around mad scientists, mob bosses, and city-destroying set pieces. Static Shock, on a kids network budget with a broadcast standards department reviewing every script, found time for racism, homelessness, dyslexia, and gun violence, and still made room for Brainiac, Justice League crossovers, and a kid figuring out his powers through trial and error like any other superhero show. It wasn't choosing between spectacle and substance. It was doing both on a tighter leash with less credit. So let's go back to that criticism. The jokes are stale, too similar to Spider-Man style. Sure, on the surface, a wisecracking teenage hero throwing one line.
I feel like to me, Static Shock should have his own game. I ain't lying to you. He should have had his own game. I feel like they should bring him up right now, bro. Low key, like maybe 2020 2027 or 2028, a Static Shock movie and the game come out, and it come out for Xbox and PlayStation and PC. That's gonna be game of the year. I'll put that in game of the year. I'll vote for it. Me.
Liners mid-fight sounds like a format you've seen before, but that critique only works if you stop at the jokes.
I mean, if Spider-Man could have a game and he retires just to mess with Mary James. Yeah, I'm gonna say that again. Retire for being Spider-Man to have a baby with Mary James. To give it to Miles. Like, I still hate that ending.
Everything sitting underneath them. Peter Parker jokes to cope with guilt over Uncle Ben. Virgil Hawkins jokes while carrying the guilt of watching a bullied classmate bring a gun to school while sitting across from his best friend's bigoted father. Same delivery style, completely different weight underneath it. Calling that stale because the joke cadence sounds familiar is like calling two boxers identical because they both know how to throw a jab. And then there's the other version of this doubt, the one that shows up in comment sections and message boards even now, more than 2 decades later, arguing that Static will never be anything other than a copy. That take doesn't hold up against a single fact we just walked through. You don't win Humanitas Prize, get invited into a Brainiac fight on the Watchtower, and headline the first black-led superhero series in television history by being somebody's shadow. You do that by being the version of the story the genre needed and didn't have the courage to tell yet. There's also a quieter, more honest version of this argument worth sitting with. The idea that Static's DNA does trace back to the Spider-Man archetype, and that's fine, because that's not the insult people think it is. Milestone's own creative team built other heroes in conversation with existing archetypes on purpose, using familiar shapes to smuggle in stories the mainstream wasn't telling. The difference was never the shape of the hero. It was what Milestone was willing to pour into it once nobody was looking over their shoulder telling them to keep it light. Static Shock was never trying to be Spider-Man with a different paint job. Static Shock is what happens when you take the exact same ordinary teenager gets powers formula and refuse to sand the real world off of it. Spider-Man got to keep his city clean enough that the villain was always the exception. Static never got that luxury. For him, the danger was baked into the origin story itself, and the show never once let him or the audience forget it. And that's what makes it so frustrating that Static has spent the better part of the last 2 decades sitting on the shelf while other, safer heroes get remaster after remaster, movie after movie. A live-action Static Shock film has been talked about, teased, and delayed for years. Meanwhile, Spider-Man gets rebooted every
2 years or every 3 years, he always come out of nowhere. Like, they just don't show love to the Static Shock or Blade. Like, there's so many people that needed like movies.
Clockwork. The character who was willing to say more, risk more, and represent more than almost anything else on Saturday morning television in the year 2000 is still waiting for the industry to catch up to what he already proved he could do. The question isn't whether Static Shock can hold up next to Spider-Man. He already did that on a kids network budget with a broadcast standards department breathing down his neck. The real question is whether DC and Warner Brothers are finally ready to give him the platform Marvel has handed Spider-Man 5 different times over. A real production budget, a real marketing push, and a story that's allowed to be exactly as unflinching as Sons of the Fathers already proved this character could be, without anyone softening it for a modern audience that's arguably more ready for it now than it was in 2000. Because here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. The industry didn't bury Static for being too derivative. It buried him for being too honest. It's a lot easier to greenlight another Spider-Man reboot than it is to fund a hero whose entire origin is built on gang violence, police escalation, and a chemical weapon fired into a crowd of teenagers. Spider-Man was comfortable, marketable, safe to put on every lunchbox in America without a second thought. Static was never going to be that, and that's exactly why he mattered more. Hit that like.
All right, and they got another one. Static was right over. This dude with red. Oh, hold on, man. I didn't know that was you, man. I'm about to give you a follow. Look, key, I didn't know because we had watched this video before. I did not know. Oh, that's crazy. Definitely, that's crazy. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. We is on the road to 700. That fat 700, and I'm out.